rather snappy, won't you? I have some very heavy thinking to do before 10 o'clock.
You've done well so far, but up until now, I've only been using a mere 5% of my power. Now let's see how well you fare against my Biden blast.
Are we having fun yet?
Hell yeah!
While you and I are talking this very minute, some slimy, green-headed, 12-legged creep could be crawling into the White House. After all, if our national leaders were elected on the basis of tricky slogans, our country would be in a terrible mess.
Hello, and welcome back to By the Ballot. I am your host, Matt Royer. I know these have been a little bit more infrequent, but we are trying our best to make sure that we are getting these out as regularly as we can. But now we are in a little bit of a time crunch, and not on this podcast, but in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Virginia is 2 weeks away from a government shutdown over a data center tax break. The industry is paying to convince you it's your problem, but a red state with the Republican legislature just proved it doesn't have to be. If you live in Senator Louise Lucas's or Senator Mamie Locke's district, you may have received a text message this weekend. It tells you that politicians in the Virginia Senate are pushing a, quote, new tax on digital infrastructure that will raise costs on hardworking Virginians, and it asks you to tell your senators to stop the digital tax. Read the fine print at the top of that text, and you find out who paid for it: the Northern Virginia Technology Council and the Virginia Chamber of Commerce. The tech industry's own lobby is spending money to text voters, claiming that ending its tax break is a tax on them. It is worth sitting with just how brazen that is. So let's go through what is actually happening, because almost every word of that text is doing work to hide it. There is no new tax on the table in Richmond. What's on the table is whether to let an existing tax break expire. For over a decade, Virginia has handed data centers a sales and use tax exemption on their equipment, the servers and the gear that fill those buildings. When it was first proposed, the exemption was projected to cost the state a small fraction of what it costs today. It now runs to roughly $1.6 billion a year in revenue that the state chooses not to collect, with the total annual value estimated to be even higher. That is not a rounding error in the Virginia budget. That is one of the largest corporate tax preferences in the Commonwealth, and it grows every time another data center opens. And it is accelerating, not holding steady. From fiscal year 2015 through fiscal year 2024, Virginia granted data centers more than $2.7 billion in tax exemptions. Then, in fiscal year 2025 alone, the state lost an estimated $1.6 billion, a 118% jump in a single year. Virginia forfeited more in that 1 year than in the previous 10 combined. I traced how a break first pitched as a modest incentive ballooned into that, and what it's already doing to your power bill in my other piece, What the Hell is a Gigawatt? So when the text says a new tax, it is describing the absence of a giveaway as if it were a penalty. Letting a subsidy expire is not a tax increase. If it were, every expiring tax break in American history would be a tax hike, and no subsidy could ever end. This matters right now because of the calendar. Virginia's budget has to be settled by June 30th, or the government shuts down on July 1st, something the Commonwealth has never actually done. The data center exemption is one of the pieces still in play. On Friday, the House released its budget. It kept the exemption whole. It created a commission to study the industry's impact, and it stripped out the enforceable environmental standards the Senate had wanted attached. Governor Abigail Spanberger praised that approach as a way to honor the state's commitments and protect ratepayers. Senator Lucas wants the exemption scaled back, and she's been touring the state making the case directly to voters. That is the actual fight. Not a new tax, but whether a subsidy that has ballooned past anyone's original estimate keeps running untouched while a commission studies it for another 2 years. And she is not softening as the deadline closes in. At the start of the Senate Finance Committee meeting on the morning of June 16th, Lucas said that the Senate conferees had been working toward a compromise with the House and had listened to the governor, then drew the line in plain terms. She had found that the House and the governor have focused their attention on protecting the data centers rather than being focused on what our citizens are asking us to do on this issue. That is the Democratic chair of the Senate Finance Committee on the record accusing a Democratic House and a Democratic governor of carrying water for Amazon, Google, and Microsoft 2 weeks before a shutdown. This is not a fight someone outside of the party is picking. It is coming from inside it. And it has gotten loud, public, and personal in a way that mostly serves the people writing those text messages. The nicknames alone tell you how far it has slid. After a budget meeting fell apart in early June, Lucas went on X and christened Governor Spanberger Data Center Diva and Speaker Don Scott Amazon Don, warning the two of them that they were making a monumental mistake. In a televised interview, she put it more plainly, Spanberger is a diva. Scott answered with a stiff diplomatic praise, calling Lucas a trailblazer and a mentor, and then days later accused her of sparking a civil war among Democrats. The Virginia Mercury's headline on the whole standoff simply reads Democratic unrest. And the dysfunction runs deeper than the name-calling. Negotiators who said they are getting close 1 week watched the talks blew up the next. Lucas floated a bare-bones skinny budget, one that funds only core services as leverage, then turned around and opposed the idea once the House picked it up. Senate Majority Leader Scott Zerville warned that some colleagues would rather bring D.C.-style continuing resolutions to Richmond than make what he called the real choice between teachers and data centers, something Virginia has never done in its history. Spanberger, for her part, insists she is the reasonable one, saying she has put forward proposals to make data centers pay their fair share for the energy they use. Meanwhile, administration officials have spent the week trading shots with online influencers and comment sections. 2 weeks before a possible shutdown, a remarkable amount of energy is going into who called whom what. Here is the thing to hold on to while the food fight plays out. The one fact not in dispute is that the $1.6 billion keeps flowing the entire time. The industry does not need to win the argument. It just needs the argument to never end. Every day, Democrats spend fighting each other over process and personality is a day that this exemption survives. The clock ticks towards June 30th, and the path of least resistance is to keep the break and study it later gets more likely. Dysfunction is the status quo's best friend, and right now the status quo is a giveaway. The text says the cost falls on hard-working Virginians. Let's be precise about who benefits and who pays because the industry has every reason to blur it. The companies that bank this exemption are the largest in the world. Amazon, Google, and Microsoft are the names behind Virginia's data center boom. The exemption comes off the cost of their equipment, which means it comes out of their profit margin. It does not change the cost of building or operating anything. It does not get passed to a single Virginia household at the checkout line. As the political analyst Bob Holsworth has put it bluntly, Virginia is handing billions a year to some of the wealthiest companies on the planet. The only line item the exemption touches is big tech's bottom line. That is the whole reason they're spending to protect it. What about the jobs? This is where the industry's pitch and the slates. What about the jobs? This is where the industry's pitch and the state's own data part ways. Virginia's Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission, or JLARC, studied the industry in 2024. It found data centers support around 74,000 jobs and contribute billions to the economy, but it has also found that the overwhelming majority of that activity happens during construction. Once a data center is built and humming, it typically employs around 50 people. These are enormous, power-hungry buildings that, in steady state, run a skeleton crew. The construction boom is real and temporary. The permanent footprint is small. Now the part the text really doesn't want you thinking about, power. And here I want to be more careful than the industry is because the honest version is damning enough without exaggeration. JLARC did not find that your electric bill is currently subsidizing data centers. It found the opposite for now. The direct costs of the new generation transmission these facilities require have been so far charged to the data centers themselves or to a customer class made up largely of data centers and other big users. There has been no crossover to ordinary households yet. But JLARC warned in plain terms that this could change as demand explodes, and the protections keeping those costs off your bill are not guaranteed to hold. And the indirect costs are already moving. Virginia's data center demand is so large it is helping drive up capacity prices across the regional grid, PJM, where recent auctions hit record highs. And those increases flow into rates for customers across multiple states. On top of that, the utility serving most of these centers, Dominion, is building new fossil fuel generation to meet the load, and that infrastructure lands in everyone's rate base. So the accurate statement is this. The giveaway goes to big tech. The direct grid costs are held off your bill by protections the state itself calls fragile, and the indirect costs are already nudging your rates upward. Stop the digital tax inverts every part of that. JLARC even put a number on the future it warned about. A typical Dominion customer could see generation and transmission costs climb by $14 to $37 more a month by 2040 in today's dollars. And the present is already bending that way. Dominion's latest approved rate increase adds roughly $16 per month to the average residential bill, and in one recent PJM capacity auction, PJM's own independent market monitor estimated that data centers drove 63% of a $9.3 billion cost increase. I laid out the full bill-by-bill math back in February in the original data center piece I wrote. But the trajectory is the point. Your bill is bending upward, and the exemption is what keeps Amazon, Google, and Microsoft from sharing the load. Remember that Friday's House budget didn't just protect the exemption. It also cut the environmental standards the Senate wanted to attach to the industry's growth. Hold that next to what the companies themselves are doing. Microsoft, one of the biggest data center builders in Virginia, is reportedly weighing whether to walk back its signature pledge to run a 24/7 carbon-free energy by 2023. Microsoft, one of the largest data center builders in Virginia, is reportedly weighing whether to walk back its signature pledge to run on 24/7 carbon-free energy by 2030, even as it expands here. Last fall, it backed Dominion's push for new gas plants. Dominion, after the data center surge, first called for several gigawatts of new gas generation, and it has since raised that number. Peer-reviewed research has found that data center demand on this scale could push the power sector's emissions sharply higher than a path without them, in part by keeping coal running longer in Northern Virginia. This is not a fringe concern. Virginia's own Lieutenant Governor Ghazala Hashmi has called the data center build-out the single greatest threat to the Commonwealth's clean energy goals. When the second highest official in the state and the company's own retreating climate pledges are both telling you the grid is getting dirtier to feed these buildings, stripping the environmental standards out of the budget is not a neutral act. It is a choice. Environmental groups like the Sierra Club have made the sharper version of that argument, and they have an agenda. The lieutenant governor and the emissions modeling are harder to wave away. And none of this is hypothetical. I documented the full toll in February. Roughly 80% of cooling water that evaporates and never returns, the round-the-clock low-frequency hum from generators and cooling systems built next to homes, schools, and nursing homes, and the warning sitting one state in Memphis. There, 33 methane gas turbines were fired up to power a single AI complex. Smog jumped nearly 60%, and that one site now throws off more nitrogen oxides than the county's chemical plant, refinery, power station, and airport combined. The neighborhood breeding it, Boxtown, is historically black and already carries some of the highest asthma-related hospital visits in Tennessee. That is the version of the future that shows up when nobody attaches standards to the build-out. Friday's budget just removed those standards. I'm not going to pretend this is simple, because it isn't, and the people defending the exemption are not all acting in bad faith. Data centers throw off real local tax revenue, and some localities have built their budgets around it. In Loudoun County, the data center hub, the industry contributes over $700 million a year, roughly 31% of the county's budget. In Mecklenburg County, data center money has paid to build entire schools. Governor Spanberger has pointed to exactly that when defending a careful approach. Unwind this too fast, and you blow holes in local budgets, invite lawsuits, and tell every company that Virginia doesn't honor its deals. Those are legitimate concerns, and any serious reformer has to answer them rather than wish them away. But notice what the argument actually justifies. It justifies a phase down, a cap, a tiering of the exemption, a real transition for dependent localities. It does not justify keeping a $1.6 billion giveaway completely intact and appointing a commission to think about it for 2 more years, 2 weeks before a shutdown deadline. This is complicated, is an argument for reform with guardrails. It is not an argument for doing nothing and calling it prudence. And Mecklenburg is the perfect illustration of the whole tangle. It's the county Spanberger cites for schools built on data center money. It is also home to one of Microsoft's largest Azure campuses. More than 20 buildings, the same company quietly backing away from its climate promises. Same county, both sides of the story. The revenue is real and the cost is real, and pretending only one of them exists is how you end up defending the status quo by accident. Here is the fact that should end the "it's too hard" conversation. Arizona this year enacted a first-in-the-nation 3-year freeze on new data center tax breaks. No new entrants get the giveaway for 3 years while the state takes stock. Estimated savings around $38 million a year. Governor Katie Hobbs had actually asked for a full repeal. The freeze is what the legislature delivered. And here's the kicker. Republicans control both chambers of the Arizona legislature. House Democrats fought the freeze into a bipartisan budget as a negotiated win in a state where they don't hold the gavel anywhere. They didn't have a trifecta. They didn't have the governorship and both chambers. They had a minority in a budget negotiation, and they still managed to stop the bleeding on new giveaways. Virginia Democrats have all three, the governor's mansion and both chambers of the General Assembly. And the plan on the table keeps the existing break whole and studies the question into 2027. To be precise, because precision is the point, Arizona froze new breaks. It did not repeal existing ones, and its $38 million is the savings for pausing new entrants, a different and smaller measure than Virginia's $1.6 billion existing exemption. The contrast isn't in the dollar figures, it's in the will. A red legislature found a way to act, and a blue state trifecta is finding reasons not to. Which brings us back to that text message. If ending this exemption really would cost ordinary Virginians, the industry wouldn't need to lie about it. The fact would do the work. Instead, the Northern Virginia Technology Council and the Virginia Chamber of Commerce are paying to blast voters in 2 senators' districts with a message that calls a corporate subsidy a tax on working families and begs them to stop that digital tax. They are spending money to manufacture the grassroots they don't have because the actual grassroots, the Virginians whose schools and rates and air are on the line, are not the ones benefiting here. You don't spend like that over a policy you're winning on the merits. You spend like that when you're scared. $1.6 billion a year buys a lot of text messages, and the people sending them are the people who keep the $1 billion. And the texts are not the part you can see. As I noted in February, Richmond runs roughly 3 data center lobbyists for every single member of the General Assembly. The text message campaign is just the same money turned outward, from working legislators to working their constituents. When the inside game gets close, the industry takes the inside game to your phone. So here's the question in front of Virginia's Democratic trifecta over the next 2 weeks. A Republican legislature in Arizona managed to freeze new giveaways to the richest companies on earth. Will a Democratic governor and a Democratic General Assembly do as much? Or will they keep the whole thing intact? Strip the environmental guardrails and let a commission run out the clock while big tech texts your neighbors that protecting its profits is protecting you. It's not a digital tax. It's a sunset. The only thing it threatens is a bottom line that can more than afford it. Thank you for reading and listening to By the Ballot. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share anywhere that you are seeing this or listening to it. we are going to try to keep these coming as regularly as possible, but we are also heading into primary season, and we are also heading into the midterm. So we will keep this coming as much as we can. But until next time, bye-bye. Thank you for reading and listening to By the Ballot. By the Ballot is an opinion series published on Substack, written, hosted, and produced by Matt Royer. Our theme music is Blah 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 by The Revolution. All views expressed are solely those of the author and should not be interpreted as reporting or objective journalism or attributed to any other individual or organization. This publication represents personal commentary, analysis, and opinion only.